Hi everyone. We're going to get going now that it's 12:15. So welcome to today's YEG Housing Month speaker. My name is Katie. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Training and Online Learning Coordinator for Homeward Trust. I'll be going through today's presentation. So we'll do about a 15 to 20 minute long presentation, and then there's going to be time for some questions that I'll hopefully be able to answer at the end. We most likely won't be able to get to all of the questions. So if there is anything that's unanswered, you can always reach out to Homeward Trust and we can try and answer it as best as possible. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the fact that even though we are gathering virtually, we are gathering on Treaty 6 territory, which is the traditional and ancestral lands of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. We at Homeward Trust acknowledge the diverse Indigenous peoples of this land, which include the Cree, Blackfoot, Dene, Iroquois, Anishinaabe, Saulteaux, Ojibwe, Nakota Sioux, Inuit, Métis, and many others whose footsteps have marked this land for time immemorial, those whose stories, languages, and cultures continue to thrive here today. As someone who has only settler ancestry background, I want to acknowledge the fact that the treaty existing is what allows me to be on this land as a visitor and as a guest, and that while we say these land acknowledgements and while we do these treaties, it's also really important to acknowledge the fact that the First Nations individuals and the Indigenous peoples of Canada have rights to this land beyond any treaty with the Crown. So today we're going to go through a quick history and overview of housing first in Edmonton. We'll chat a little bit about what homelessness looks like right now in Edmonton and go through some of the history of how we've been responding to homelessness and what we're hoping to be able to do moving forward. We're going to cover a really broad topic. So I do want to stress that I'm not going to be able to talk about every single project and every single area of the homelessness sector because it is so broad. So if I leave anyone out or if I leave any project out or anything like that, just know that your work is really valued and is really incredible. And I'm sorry that I wasn't able to talk about it that much in today's presentation. We just have a limited amount of time. So the first thing to kind of chat about is what homelessness looks like right now in Edmonton. So this graphic is a screenshot of one of our publicly accessible dashboards, which breaks down some really important stats for what's going on in homelessness in Edmonton. This was last updated on November 21st, so only a couple of days ago. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but it is publicly accessible for anyone who's really interested in data and would like to have a better understanding of really what's going on in homelessness in Edmonton. Right now, we have over 2,700 people that we know about who are experiencing homelessness in the city of Edmonton. The reality is that there's always going to be people that we don't know about who are experiencing it. A really important couple of stats to draw people's attention to is the fact that Indigenous people are vastly overrepresented in those experiencing homelessness. As you can see on the dashboard, those who identify as Indigenous make up about 46% of the population of those experiencing homelessness, when they make up around 5% of the overall population. That's due to a lot of historical issues of racism, including the residential schools, the boarding schools, the past systems, 60s scoop, but also current realities of discrimination and lack of funding and everything. Another stat that I think that's always really important to draw people's attention to is what's referred to as the location of stay. When we talk about homelessness and people's experiences of homelessness, I think that it's really easy to have one sort of static image or one sort of set image of what someone experiencing homelessness looks like or what their experience looks like. But as people can see, about 48% of those experiencing homelessness are housed in what's referred to as provisionally accommodations. So that's individuals who are couch surfing, who are staying in treatment facilities in a hospital, who may technically have a place to stay and may not be accessing shelters or may not be staying in encampments, but are staying in unstable or inadequate locations. They might be unsafe, and those individuals don't have any rights or autonomy over those locations. So data is something that's really important to us at Homeward Trust. Data is not people, and it doesn't tell the whole story, but what we can do by gathering this information and gathering this data is have an understanding of what's going on in homelessness in Edmonton, and to be able to target our approaches, to be able to kind of address trends and meet the needs of the individuals that we're trying to support. So this data is constantly being updated. It's constantly being refreshed. So the next time that you log onto the website, it might look a little bit different. This is a breakdown of homelessness in Edmonton in terms of stats, in terms of the number of people who are experiencing homelessness in Edmonton from 1999 to 2022. So as you can see, it would have peaked around 2008. In 2017, we introduced what is referred to as our by name list, which I'll talk a little bit more about, that gave us a more accurate and in-depth understanding of how many people were experiencing homelessness and what their situations were. During the pandemic, homelessness unfortunately did double in terms of the people that we knew about who are experiencing homelessness. This was due to just a lot of different factors that the pandemic created, including really detrimental effects on people's physical and mental health, really detrimental effects on people's financial well-being, but also homelessness was really in the media a lot. And the more that it's in the media and the more that people are talking about it, sometimes it's easier to get people connected with services and make it a little bit easier to track people and say, like, let's get you on a list, let's get you some help and everything. So which means that the number of people that we know about also goes up. And then this is Edmonton's by name list. So Edmonton, for how we kind of, the by name list represents the work of over 60 agencies in Edmonton, which document individuals experiencing homelessness and refer them to our list and can refer them and put them on the waiting list for services. The by name list is different than most waiting lists in the sense that it is by individuals' names and situations, and it's not a first come, first served list. It's based off of prioritization of need as much as possible. What's really unique and really important about the by name list is that it really is work across many different sectors and across many different agencies. The reality of homelessness in Edmonton is that not everyone accesses certain services. So not everyone accesses shelters, or not everyone accesses meal services or drop-in services. Some individuals are provisionally accommodated throughout the city in pockets in like the Northwest, in Mill Woods, in the Far East parts of the city. So by working with multiple different agencies, we're able to really get a full understanding and really reach people rather than just going into a shelter and taking everyone's name down in that shelter who's experiencing homelessness. We can hear about the individuals in the farther corners of the city and get them connected with the same help and get them moved out of homelessness into their own home. The by name list, again, is constantly being updated. It's updated as new individuals experience homelessness and we're able to get in contact with them. And then it's also updated as people's homelessness are able to be resolved and they move into their own homes. So we chat a lot about housing first in Homeward Trust, and then also in this presentation, we'll chat about it a lot. So one of the first things that I always like to talk about really is like, what is housing first and what does that mean? So housing first is both an intervention strategy, but it's also a general philosophy. For a really long time, the strategy for ending homelessness was what was referred to as treatment first. There are a couple of different ways that this looked, but in the graphic, as you can see, someone was experiencing homelessness. Through the treatment first model, they were moved into a shelter placement. If they did well in that shelter placement, they worked well with the staff, they seemed really engaged and everything, then they might be able to be moved into a transitional housing facility. If they did well in that transitional housing facility, you know, they followed the rules, the staff really enjoyed them and everything, they got along well with the other people and everything, then it was deemed that they were ready or willing to get permanent housing. And that was really just like a step-by-step sort of treatment facility or treatment model. And it was a lot of hoop jumping and a lot of steps that people had to go through. What housing first is really stripping away all of those middle steps and is the belief that individuals who are experiencing homelessness should be moved and assisted in moving into permanent housing with no housing readiness requirements and supports delivered to them in their community. So instead of them having to go through a shelter placement, instead of them having to go through transitional housing, instead of them having to prove sobriety, prove an income level, prove a certain level of compliance, individuals are instead moved directly into permanent housing and given supports that they need to be able to stay housed. So when we talk a little bit about what Housing First looks like, it's really the belief as well that an individual should be housed rapidly and permanently without the expectation that they're compliant or sober, employed with an income, graduated from a transitional housing facility, or that they're nice. It's the belief that everyone has the basic human right to access housing that meets their needs, regardless of them kind of following through with all of those things. When we talk about it as an intervention strategy, that looks really different throughout the city. So we're going to talk about a couple of different intervention strategies and what it really looks like on the groundwork. So again, as I said, I work for Homeward Trust. Homeward Trust is the system planner for Edmonton's response to ending homelessness. And that means a lot of different things. So we lead the efforts in terms of ending homelessness, including the plans that are updated both on a provincial and local level. These plans are updated every few years, I'm going to say. I won't commit to an exact timeline, as the sector needs change, and also as we learn more about how to best respond to homelessness and different intervention strategies and what else the sector really needs. Homeward Trust is responsible for stewarding funding from all three levels of government, and we work with a variety of different community agencies to be able to create different programs, different housing supplies, and different community capacities to ending homelessness. Ending homelessness is really, really like a sector-wide and honestly city-wide effort to be able to do it effectively. It involves not only Homeward Trust and not only governments, but it involves landlords, it involves other community agencies, it involves Alberta supports, drop-in centers, and really everyone working together well to be able to effectively meet the needs and get everyone the help that they deserve. It's really also about Homeward Trust and about the sector in general, about taking risks and learning, and to be able to address the kind of dynamic needs. The needs of the sector are constantly changing because the people who are in the sector are constantly changing. The population, the needs that they're experiencing, the barriers that they're experiencing, all of that is constantly evolving and changing. So Homeward Trust and the community at large is constantly trying to plan and engage to figure out the best next steps, review and invest more in what's working, and taking risks and learning from what we've done so far. This also involves a lot of evaluation, a lot of ensuring that what we're doing is best practice in our sector. As I said, individuals who are Indigenous are grossly overrepresented in the homelessness population due to a lot of past historical discrimination, but also current day and active discrimination that's still happening. To be able to really address how vastly overrepresented they are, Homeward Trust has tried to incorporate Indigenous priorities into all levels of the system, from governance, where we are required to have a minimum of 4 Indigenous board members on a total number of 9 board members. We have Indigenous advisory councils. We have a participant and partnership in different events. On the program and more of like ground level, we have specific teams that are led by mostly Indigenous individuals who house mostly Indigenous individuals. There's a specific youth team as well. We also have specific training and education and access for frontline workers, but also for the people that we're serving, access for them to be able to connect with cultures and get connected with the supports that they need. So Housing First is proven to work. It is not only an ethical response in terms of acknowledging the fact that everyone deserves housing and everyone deserves housing regardless of what their situation is, but it's also a proven intervention strategy in terms of its effectiveness and its impact on the sector. So as we can see, people like stats, and I always like to be able to kind of display why Housing First is effective. So when you're housing someone for about a month, One person experiencing homelessness, when you house them in affordable housing without supports, that costs about $1,000 to $1,500. If they're staying in a shelter, that costs about $2,000, versus if they are incarcerated, that costs over $4,000. And if they are hospitalized, that costs close to $11,000. So it is not only ethical, but it is also cheaper to house people and to be able to put them up in affordable housing rather than allowing them to remain homeless. Since 2009, there have been over 15,000 people housed in the city of Edmonton. 85% of the individuals who have been housed remain housed a year after entering the program. And 80% of them live in rental suites with private landlords. So places like Main Street and Boardwalk and trying to think of Avenue Living and all of that stuff, places that lots of individuals who are not experiencing homelessness are also housed. So scaling it a little bit more in terms of what it looks like for the work that we're doing and the workers. In 2008, there were less than 35 programs and projects and interventions that were supported by the Edmonton Housing Trust Fund. Currently, there are over 100 programs, projects, and interventions. This includes over 250 full-time staff equivalent individuals working in housing and support programs. We have the capacity to have over 1,800 individuals currently supported by housing programs. And we're opening up an additional 214 supportive housing beds over the next couple of months, which I'll discuss a little bit later. What this looks like is a really vast range of programs and different support systems. Again, I'm not going to be able to talk about these in as much depth as I wish that I could. Our coordinated access team is housed in-house within Homeward Trust, and they are the main go-to people that maintain and update our by name list, again, alongside of our over 60 other partner agencies that work in other different organizations. We have specific programs that house youth, which are individuals who are 16 to 24. We have specific Indigenous programs. We have bridge housing sites, which are temporary housing for individuals who are working with a housing worker so that they have a safe place to stay while they're transitioning out of homelessness into permanent housing. We also have a variety of clinical and high intensity support services available for folks who have more intense needs and more clinical needs so that they can have their housing needs addressed, but also other basic needs addressed so that they're able to maintain housing and live a fulfilling life. As I said, we're constantly in Edmonton trying to learn and develop and change what we're doing and adding new programs as we identify new needs to be able to end homelessness. Talked a little bit about bridge housing, which was a response that came up during the pandemic. The pandemic was obviously incredibly scary for a lot of people, and there was huge amounts of response to be able to support individuals who were experiencing homelessness, who couldn't shelter safely, who couldn't isolate in a lot of ways, and were more exposed to the COVID than a lot of other individuals. There are specific encampment and outreach program supports that are being developed and that are working their existence right now to be able to support our individuals who are sleeping in encampments and help get their basic needs met, but also address their housing needs. We have different culture support workers, peer support positions for supporting housing teams and the individuals who are there. So during the pandemic, housing never stopped. We have housed over 4,000, close to 5,000 individuals since the onset of COVID-19. And again, in total, we've housed over 15,000 people since 2009. This photo in the PowerPoint slide is not a stock photo. When during the pandemic, for a while, I was a youth housing outreach worker. And that's a photo of keys that I took on the day that I moved in, one of the youth that I was working with during the pandemic. Obviously got all of the consent needed for that photo to be taken and included in programs and presentations and everything. But this is a real photo of keys from someone on their move-in day where they were able to take the keys, set up their belongings, and move out of homelessness. This is a breakdown of the housings over time. So as you can see, as we've been able to slowly like add on the housings year after year, everything. We've not only been able to house adults and youth and everything, but also their dependents, which include children. As we look into the future, we're constantly modeling need and trying to figure out where the best investments are to be able to end homelessness. This kind of breaks down what we're looking at in terms of the next couple of years all the way to 2026. So cumulative changes year over year, which shows the number of spaces that we're hoping to be able to have available for individuals. So we'll talk a little bit about supportive housing, but like intensive case management and assertive community treatment, rapid rehousing, all of those are different housing programs that address people or that house people with a variety of different needs. Okay. And then this is the last slide before we start going into questions. But this, so in the next couple of months, we're going to be opening and adding 214 new beds to the supportive housing bed that already exists. So we're opening up 5 different buildings, which will add those 214 new beds. Supportive housing provides permanent homes and 24/7 site supports for people who are experiencing homelessness right now. So what it is different buildings that address different needs depending on the person's circumstances, with an individual has their own unit, or they might share with a roommate depending on their circumstances, but they'll have their own home by having their own unit. And then in-house and in those buildings, they have supports that are available 24/7 to them to make sure that their mental health, their physical health, and all of their basic needs are being addressed so that they can be taken care of adequately during their stay. For some people, that's going to be their permanent home and they will stay there for the rest of their life. Supportive housing meets and fills a need for individuals who might not necessarily be able to successfully stay in market housing. And it's really, really been needed for the sector. Anyone who works in the sector can talk a lot about how needed supportive housing sites have been. So opening up these 214 sites is really going to be incredibly beneficial for those hundreds of people who are going to be moving in and the sector as a whole, as we're able to adequately address their needs and give them the supports that they deserve. Supportive housing is not a shelter, drop-in, halfway house, or any other type of temporary accommodations. It's a home for those individuals who are going to be moving in. Yeah, okay. Bear with me. I'm going to try my best to answer the Q&A stuff as best as possible.
Just before you jump into that, thanks so much, Katie. You did a fantastic job. I just want to thank everyone that attended today for our Edmonton Housing Month Speaker Series Lunch and Learn presentation. Housing Month is a collaborative effort of about 10 local sector partner organizations to raise awareness and elevate conversations about the need to increase affordable and supportive housing and the local efforts to end homelessness in the capital region. You can read more on this at housingmonth.ca. You can also register for the remaining speaker series Lunch and Learns from both Bendero Traditional Healing Society and the City of Edmonton. You can also watch all the previous presentations from earlier this month. We would love if you would share or engage on social media using the YEG Housing Month hashtag. Keep the conversation going. And with that, I will let Katie get to your questions.
Yeah, awesome. So we've got 20 minutes. I'll do my best to address all of them, or there might be none, and then that's okay. Okay, we don't have any questions right now, which is why I'm sort of sitting and staring. I have an education degree, so it has been ingrained in me to stare at individuals who have not asked questions yet. I used to do that to my students all the time. We have one question about accessing coordinated access. Coordinated access is the best way to be able to get people referred to Housing First and to get people on the by name list. The information can be found on our website. And maybe, Brandon, do you mind just grabbing the number for me?
Yes, just 1 second. I'll type that in there.
Okay, wonderful. We have a question for, how do people get referred? The best way to get referred to is connecting with coordinated access. You can reach them via email, phone, and then they also have different in-person locations where you can send people to. Individuals are able to self-refer. You can call in yourself. It is a screening process, so they have to talk to the person who's experiencing homelessness, but they can also be referred by a worker and everything. There's a question from Lisa. How can a person on AISH whose mental health and addictions are stable but cannot find affordable housing? They're a single male requiring to live the Southwest to be near their medical hub, primary care network, family doctor, and family. There is no housing. Affordable housing is definitely a need that we're trying to address as best as possible in the city. So the best thing that I can offer you right now is to reach out to Coordinated Access to try and start getting some supports and bouncing some ideas and everything off of them. There is a little bit of a wait time, so reaching out to Coordinated Access isn't an immediate response for supports in terms of like housing, but they can try to address your needs as best as possible and try and figure out some options for you. There was a question about getting a copy of the presentation. I'll double check. I probably can send this via PDF. So I'll write down your email and I'll let you know.
I also have a recording of this presentation up later today on housingmonth.ca.
There is a question on, can you expand on the financial and rent support that Homeward Trust provides to those in the Housing First programs? I won't talk about it too much because like a lot of other things, it is really individualized and it's based off of needs. But when individuals are in the program and only when they're in the program, there is some financial assistance to help cover the cost of rent, but that's not available if they're not within the program. And it is really individualized and it's based off of people's circumstances. Okay. Any other questions or anything anyone has?
I think for questions that are a bit more personal, you can visit homewardtrust.ca and go to our housing support and services page, and you can connect with Coordinated Access there. There's an email address and a phone number. Phone number is 780-702-5267. I guess if that's all of the question. Just more kudos for a great presentation. If that is all of the questions, we can probably wrap it up there. And thank you all for attending and setting time aside for us. Hope that you've gleaned something from this excellent presentation Katie put together. Again, remember that there are a couple of more Housing Month lunch and learns coming up. On Friday is Bent Arrow, and next Monday would be the City of Edmonton. But thank you so much. Have a great day.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, you guys.
Take care.